Hi, welcome everyone. And thanks for joining us today. My name's Jen Cleary. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Content here at Bow Clips. And I've previous to that was a teacher for about 10 years here in the UK. I mostly work with students who had been through kind of either the justice system or who had been multiply excluded from school. And so a lot of them had special educational needs and other things. And I guess in the end, that story led me to working at Bow Clips about 6 years ago now. I've been here a while. Um, because I passionately believe that video is an important part of helping all students to learn and an accessible one too. And I'm really excited today to be talking with Ryan, who can introduce himself in a sec. A little bit more about, what AI can do in terms of helping some of those students, all students, in fact, get the most out of their learning and their learning journeys as well. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, yeah, thanks. So my name is Ryan Varley. I am SVP of Technology at Bowclips. So I run the data and engineering teams here primarily. And, we build a lot of the AI and machine learning features that you might see. My background is in data science. Before LLMs were a thing and everyone was using the term AI when it was all machine learning. Um, yeah, and very recently, obviously over the last few years, have been focusing a lot more on the LLM and AI side of things.
Great. And we're just hoping today to have a bit of a conversation. I think there's a lot that we can say about AI in education. I'm sure some of you that have joined might also have quite a few thoughts as well. And just hopefully have a chat through, what the landscape looks like, where we see the future is, things like that. While we're chatting though, please do feel free to put in your thoughts in the chat box. We'd love to hear them, love to hear your questions. We'll try and get to some of them while we're having our conversation, but if we don't, there'll definitely be time at the end to try and answer any questions that you guys have. So yeah, I guess my first question for you, Ryan, is how do you think AI in general has evolved? I guess since the advent of ChatGPT in 2022, and that sort of seemed to change the world a little bit. How do you think it's sort of evolved since then?
Yeah, I mean, before ChatGPT launched in December 2022, or I think strictly, it was like one of the last days in November, and it was very quickly adopted. And it was interesting because obviously it just followed the pandemic, which was a big focus on sort of remote learning, and we saw a lot of sort of remote tools, especially in education and ed tech. Um, and when ChatGPT first released, I think obviously everyone was getting used to that sort of chat style interface and what you could do with it. And then pretty quickly, we had all of what I would call the sort of light wrappers. So lots and lots of people releasing light products that did things like was a tutor or they were a lesson planner. And they're essentially just writing the prompt for you and allowing you to sort of put parts of the prompt in a box. So just trying to make it a little bit easier than using ChatGPT directly. And I think a lot of these have not they're not still around or they're not still being used because they were too light a wrapper. They weren't very useful. They were kind of very lazy features. I know at least when I showed some of these types of things to some of the teachers I know, they were like, wow, this is going to save so much time. It's amazing. And then they tried to use them and actually it didn't. Um, since then, I think you saw companies putting AI in their product however they could. Just, summarizers, text generators, again, not super useful. Google put an AI image generator in their editing software and stuff, and it was rubbish. Like it just generated the worst images, and I don't really know why they did it. And Miro did the same. So you saw a lot of that. What we're getting to now is, I think, a point where some actual good, thoughtful tooling is emerging. And this is partly driven by just time. People have learned how to use it, thought how to use it. Um, but it's also, I think, driven by maybe the price of the large language models. So, like, people probably don't realize if they're not developing these features themselves. But when ChatGPT first launched, if you wanted to use it as a developer, it would cost you $30 for 1 million input tokens. Um, it now costs you, for the better models that are out now, $2.5. So $2.50. It's a sixth of the price for output and a tenth of their price for input. So it's so much cheaper than it was, and it's so much faster than it was as well. And I think it's pretty rare that you see a technology get not just better this quickly, but faster this quickly and cheaper this quickly. And I think that's really driven the tooling that's existed now, when it's also going to really drive what can be done if this continues. So yeah, like the good tooling that we're seeing are things like Oak National. It's a UK based company that works on like UK lessons and supporting teachers, and they built something called Isla, which is a lesson planner. But rather than the other ones, that's just like input the topic and here's a lesson. They actually developed a structured interface that like asks questions, involves the teacher to like customize things, and they also bound their they call it anchoring. They anchor the output in an actual lesson that exists, which gets a really good output from the AI.
That makes loads of sense. I guess as well, there's, I think when I first started playing around with trying to do things like lesson planning in ChatGPT, you could get good results, but you would have to do quite a lot of the training yourself to tell them, I don't know, what the needs were of the 30 children that were likely to be in your class, and what kinds of levels they were reading and writing at, for example, and to then have to kind of keep reminding a bot about all of those quite in-depth facts in order to just be able to get something that's supposed to save you time probably isn't very helpful. So, moving forward, something that's able to kind of rely on that a little bit more sort of objective data as a guiding point does make a lot of sense.
I think that was a thing that most people experienced. I think most people on this call, I mean, you can add into the chat if you've experienced this, but pretty much a lot of the AI products just looked really good at face value. You were like, wow, look at all of that output that it gave me. Look at that email that it gave me, that marketing, that lesson plan, etc. But then when you actually tried to use it properly, the amount of work you had to put in wasn't too dissimilar to if you just done it yourself from scratch. Or in the case of things like lesson plannings, used existing resources that are out there on the web. And in fact, sometimes could have even took more time. So I think like a lot of people have seen like the final mile on AI products is very large. You can get something that looks good quite quickly, but to actually be useful, and that's something someone will use day to day and saves them a lot of time, it takes a lot longer to build that.
Are there any other sort of good tools that you've been able to see out there, or you think sort of opportunities that are there to be made?
I mean, there's lots of opportunities, and I think we'll get into that a bit later in the other sections when we talk about sort of tutors and personalization. But there is like sort of standard tools, like, there's more and more people using things like Perplexity for search. So instead of using Google, using an AI which helps summarize results, but also has the referencing, which is quite important. So actually baking the results on real search results. So it's that you're reducing hallucinations, and then really importantly, telling you where that came from so that um, you can do it.
Which to be fair is exactly what we've been trying to do at Bowclips by including video in some of our AI results, and you can see some of that on our highlights bot if you go and sign up and see how it can start to reduce hallucinations in terms of answering questions by relying on the sort of quality, creator driven made content that we already have on the platform to be the actual answer to the questions, and potentially a little bit more engaging than some of the texts as well. Yeah, I guess, I think for me as a sort of educator, the biggest sort of announcement thing that seems to be what a lot of people have been talking about is that tutorbot experience. And I think, the big one that everyone's talking about, and probably the one that, most people have had a go on at some point, is the Calmigo TutorBot, which was announced 2023, I guess. And I guess, that's been quite interesting to see, because obviously I can absolutely see why, why and what they're aiming for with that. And I think a lot of the messaging that's come from Sal Khan about that bot has been about, providing everyone in the world with their own personalized tutor, and being able to sort of tap into a level of learning that perhaps hasn't been available before, and democratize learning a little bit. But at the same time, I think, I don't think anyone's had an experience of that necessarily feels like, the smoothest, best final experience that they would expect. There's all kinds of concerns still across teachers, educators, district leaders, and beyond, parents especially, about the accuracy and relevancy when it comes to any kind of AI tutor bot. I think especially, can it ever really replace a real person in terms of, how well it explains something, or how it approaches scaffolding the pedagogy of teaching something in particular. And then I also think that, the other part of it is how engaging can it be? We do use video, but if you look at the Calm Migo tutorbot, a lot of it is still very text-based, even though they have quite a lot of videos available. They still haven't quite managed to integrate them effectively. And I do wonder if we're still a while off from that truly feeling like a sort of seamless experience.
Yeah. So I guess that's like the sort of challenges of AI in education, and why we haven't seen wider adoption of AI in education. It sort of links into it. Khan Academy is probably one of the ones that have got furthest with trying to address some of these things. And we had a question in the chat about hallucinations as well. And the fact that AI can get things wrong, and I think there is a thing around, if a human gets something wrong, people are kind of more okay with it than if an AI gets something wrong. And especially true in education. The idea that an AI could give an inaccurate answer or hallucinate a bad answer is really scary, and really, like, to a lot of people, and they really don't want that to happen. And there's been a lot of improvements in this. The models themselves have just got better. They've also had lots more layers of safety that look for things that are incorrect, look for answers that might be inappropriate, and also what we talked about around the anchoring. So anyone that's really making education products is looking at anchoring content. So we anchor quite a bit of our stuff on the videos that we have. So we have like the transcripts from the videos and the description. So if we give an AI response, we can use that video as like a truth for the answer. And that's what Oak National was doing when they were providing their lesson planner. They had lessons that they could anchor their lesson plans in. And Khan Academy does the same. Khan Academy has a wider range of resources that they can anchor stuff in. But why do you think, Jen, that we haven't seen AI used more widely in education so far?
I think it's a lot to do with, education is not an area that classically moves quickly on things. I wish that it was, but it's not. And that, a lot of that is, a whole host of problems, the digital divide, funding in general across schools, time for training. And I think, that in some ways that's okay. I think, as was the case with, the advent of the internet, as was the case with, some of the, I think sort of 10 or 15 years ago, some of the makerspace, Raspberry Pi type hardware pieces that were brought in that were kind of quite new. I was quite involved in that at the time. And I think it's always going to be driven by a small number of enthusiastic advocates in any given school. And I suspect the same is going to be true of the AI, that there will be a sort of handful in any school globally of teachers who, really believe in it, really want to make the most out of it, and will really sort of be the ones to test it, and, get it hopefully to the point where it's sort of more common practice and more accessible. And as you said, it's getting cheaper, and hopefully the savings there is something that might be passed down to teachers and educators as well. But I think, the bottom line is the student experience. And for me, the top thing on student experience has always been engagement. I think without engaging a student, you can't really get very far with anything. And I mean, there's some fantastic features that have been rolled out that I definitely think could be engaging. I think one of the Calmigo features, for example, is about talking to an imaginary character from a book. So you can actually talk to Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice or whatever, and really understand their character. And I really like that. And that's, I think, starting to think about how you can really use it differently to engage not just educators, but also the students, and how their imagination works, and kind of how children especially like to explore. And then I think that's the bit that is going to really allow this to take off. And similarly with the makerspace, I think as it developed, I think some of those little bits of hardware for coding and things like that, the more it taps into children's imagination for wanting to make things and do things and imagine things, the more it's going to work. And I guess in that sense, there has to be a level of activity with it as well. And I think, what potential it has for things like interactive games, much more interesting assessment, that might be a little bit more tailored to you, things like literacy tools that I think I can't actually remember the name of this tool, but I met someone recently who was really using AI to get the most out of some of the pens that you might use to help students with dyslexia, where you can sort of focus the pen on an individual word, and the pen will read out the word for you. But they've been around for a really long time. But actually what AI's done is it's allowed him to not just allow the pen to read out the word, but also point to lots of other words, explain what the word means, tell them to go to another part of a book to continue on that learning journey about that word. And it sort of suddenly becomes so much more of a tool than it has been for the last 15 years or so. So I think that's probably where the future is. I guess.
And that's really important, isn't it? That anything in education is a tool and not a crutch, because it's so easy to make a crutch. You can imagine, like, students are already using AI, and you can talk about how much you should involve that in the classroom, but a student can solve their homework with ChatGPT. They can write an essay with ChatGPT. They can do a lot of things with ChatGPT, but they haven't learned that. And the reason these things are done is for learning. And that's where the crutch comes in. Like, an example I like to use before AI is, I feel like since I started using a spell checker professionally, my spelling hasn't improved. I still make the same spelling mistakes I make years ago, because it becomes a crutch. And in education, tooling needs to be a tool. It needs to be benefiting. It needs to enhance learning. It can't just be a crutch, even if you have that crutch available to you in the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Anyone who's ever tried to switch their Google Maps off in this day and age and remember the way to the place you've definitely driven to 5 times before. I definitely don't learn my way around as well as I did. And I think part of that, and obviously this is, I think, probably the most important part of some of the biggest barriers to adoption, is really that safety aspect. And it took 10, 15, 20 years really before we saw parts of the internet feel safe enough for widespread use in schools. And even now, I think we can all very much agree that that is not a given. It's just that we maybe have built better firewalls, built better filtering tools, built better networking tools, things like this. And I think that's probably, I don't think it's going to be as long as that for AI, but I do think that safety aspect is absolutely table stakes for any AI product trying to get into common use by teachers. you have to make sure that there isn't anything offensive that gets through. There isn't anything inappropriate for age groups that gets through, especially if it's a student-facing tool. You have to make sure that, and I think this is true actually, and something that we think about a lot at Bowclips, we have to make sure that the intellectual property concerns are considered as well. Advertising is an absolute no. And I think being able to, verify your product to that level that might be required might be quite difficult. And I've definitely heard anecdotally that in the meantime, quite a lot of school districts and schools themselves are spending 12, 15 weeks just training teachers on how to use certain tools before they feel confident enough to lift the firewall and let them loose. And I think that training part, so that people feel like they're confident that educators know what they're doing with a tool, is totally key.
And it's really hard because hallucinations are kind of like an inherent part of the model. They're not like a bug in the code. Like all these large language models have kind of approximated the world's knowledge, and they make guesses based on that approximation. So they don't know truth. They know they're basically like posh autocorrect, like autocompletes. So you can't hallucination is kind of like inherently built into the model. It's how they work. They work by predicting the next most likely token based on a input they haven't seen before, but they've seen similar things before. So really a lot of the work goes into detecting that there's a hallucination via like a second process, or trying to anchor content. And I think that's what you've seen a lot with the education. It's all about trying to anchor content in truth. And I think you'll continue to see that for safety.
No, and I think that's why the lesson planning tools are such an obvious first step, really, for what could happen next. And that, is definitely not to replace teachers with AI, but tools that can make life a lot quicker for them. But you still have that human element involved. It really is just, can you inspire me of a good way to teach something? One of the things that I think I tried years ago when I was sort of teaching in special educational needs, I had a group of grade 8 boys who, I think something like 75% of them could not read beyond a grade 3 level. Nearly 90% of them had come from, what was sort of statistically identified in the UK as, a household in poverty. And, most of them had, been excluded from other schools at least. And, I got told by the UK curriculum that I had to somehow teach them Hamlet to a point where they could sit an exam on it, which felt like an impossible ask. So, we had a lot to think about with that. And thanks to my team at the time, we came up with teaching Hamlet using The Lion King, because actually it's the same story. And there's loads and loads of comparisons, and it worked really well. But it took ages to come up with something like that. You really had to imagine hard and do a lot of research. And I think when I first started playing around with some of the lesson planning tools, it's the kind of thing it suggests to you really quickly, because it already knows those connections and those facts, and it can really inspire you. And I just think, imagine the time that could have been spared, plus, the benefit of having this sort of think partner, if you like, in terms of thinking of new and innovative ways to deliver lessons. And I think that's where the lesson planners feel like the most sort of interesting thing that's on the market at the moment. And especially ones that can take into consideration all of those accessibility needs as well, because, spending time doing that for every single student can be quite difficult. And because you still then have the human element of being able to sort of take that away and make that relevant, and not worrying about having the sort of, all the issues that might come with a sort of tutor bot, a Carmigo conversation with a student that might, at the end, as you say, might hallucinate, might be wrong. But I think that's probably where the future of learning likely exists, right? Is in those more personalized journeys that AI can sort of tap into.
Yeah,
Um,
on the technology side, I mean, people have been hearing, I guess, about personalization in education from a technology standpoint for, I mean, I want to say decades. Like it's always been a thing that we personalizing, and it's to an extent what a teacher can do themselves. But in technology, it's kind of always been an aspiration, I think, for a lot of ed techs. Like personalization has been we provide multiple resources, or if there is a software, it tends to be something like uh, there's multiple paths, but only a handful, and you can kind of direct people between the paths, or maybe share some of the resources. AI feels like the first time that true personalization might be possible. You already see it a bit with chat. If you just use ChatGPT yourself, you can ask it to explain things in different ways. You can ask it to um, try and find other resources or stuff like that. And if you build some software, you can imagine how you might be able to learn the characteristics of a student and what they're asking, and then start presenting that information to them without them having to prompt you for it. So, and AI also allows you to, like, we see it with videos. You can, if you know something about a student or the question, and it kind of goes to your Lion King example, before you return a result. So if you just search for it, you can return results like videos, which is what we would currently do. But if you look into some of the things that we've been developing, like highlights, which people on this call can try, that it's at highlights.boclips.com. It's a sort of a style of a tutor that also incorporates video. What you can do with that is say, is this video relevant to the question? Is this video at the appropriate age level for the question? Is it um, something like that? So you can actually include with AI, you can actually get it to do some sense checking on the answer. And you can also get it to explain why, which is again what you were saying. You can get it explain this is a good resource because of this, or you can get it to set up the video and stuff like that. I think this is really exciting for the future of tooling because the possibilities are kind of endless. You can actually have AI making decisions on what video to show, what resource to show, what lesson to show, what quiz to show. You can have it tweak the questions, like make these questions harder for a student, make them easier. And you can have it do that on the fly and personalize to individuals. And that just didn't really feel possible, like as a data scientist before, despite what people said and their aspirations.
Absolutely. I think it is just, fast forwarded a lot of that development now. I think on a similar note, Jordan in the chat points out that if it was a Google Maps example, then perhaps you may never get to a place you've never been before without it, which is totally true. Um, I was driving around the Highlands of Scotland a couple of weeks ago and definitely did not know my way around if it hadn't been for Google Maps. But I think, the point that, is being made in that and is there is that in terms of AI and education, a lot of it is helping students discover new things, and perform kind of initial knowledge discovery on uncharted topics. And, I think there's quite a lot of potential there that has kind of been untapped. And I guess I totally agree, in the sense that, the job that I have now didn't exist when I was at school, a very long time ago. And I think that the job that those students who are in school now will have in the future probably doesn't exist yet. And, one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that we need to prepare those students for the world that they might be working in the future. And a lot of our education system is set up in a kind of pretty Victorian way sometimes with, if we go back to sort of rote learning and explaining things followed by an exam and a quiz, it's quite sort of one-dimensional. I think a lot has been done in the world of education now to move that forward, but it's, it doesn't stay static. It's something that needs to keep moving, and allowing students to learn how to use AI and how to get the most out of the tools that are available is also going to be a really key part of that teaching moving forward.
I would argue that it is a crutch, though. Google Maps or GPS is a crutch, as in you are teaching people can't operate without it. So yes, I think a lot of people that drive or have learned to drive in sort of the last 5 to 10 years would struggle to navigate without GPS. They would struggle to navigate based on maps or road signs or plan routes. So I would say that technology is a crutch. But is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, because it's always available. Um, should people not use useful things just because they couldn't do the thing without? I think the beauty of a lot of technology is it enables to do things that we couldn't do without it. So I don't think it's necessarily a lot of these things we use day to day that are crutches are a bad thing. But I think when you think about education, it's important to think of that, because if you allow students to always write essays with um, ChatGPT, then they never learn how to do that themselves. And you need to think, is that desired? Because on the one hand, do they ever need to do that? Because they're going to enter a world where AI can always do that for them, um, or not. And it has to be a conscious decision about what you're doing. And I think it's always really difficult with education, because you're not just trying to teach people about history or geography. You're trying to teach like fundamental skills that help them out in life. And you need to think about what they're learning. So like being able to write essays is about like being able to make arguments and being able to do research and being able to do all these other things. And ChatGPT would make you not learn some of those skills. So maybe we need to teach those things in a different way. Maybe we don't need to teach some of those things at all. Um, but it's not an easy answer.
I mean, yeah, totally. And I'm that annoying millennial that gets fed up with my father-in-law every Christmas for giving me over detailed explanations for how to drive to his house when I know I can just plug it into Google Maps. But I think that's key, right? Is maybe there's a world in which we need to make sure that students right now aren't using ChatGPT to write their essays for them. And I, absolutely see that. And I think I don't envy the role of, especially in universities and things like that, the role of some of the professors and teachers that are having to check this and moderate this and look for plagiarism, as well as the tools that are out there to do this. I think their job just got a lot harder. So, I think that is key, but at the same time, maybe we do need to think about education slightly differently. What I think, for example, in the world of work, we work together a lot more. We're often in a team as part of a company, and ideas don't come from one person and just get implemented. They come from groups of people working together and iterating on each other's thoughts. And, maybe we do need to model our education system a little bit more around that, and a little bit more around, harnessing the tools and solving problems rather than just sort of answering questions. But seems like the chat's been disabled. I'm sorry. There is a
The
Q&A
Q&A is available then.
section if you want to put your questions in as well. So there is another question here actually. To what extent could AI help tailor a lesson for a child with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or other special educational needs? I think that's a really good question. In terms of those needs, they can be varied, they can be different, and they can be different for every child with the same diagnosis. At the moment, I think that it's probably in its early stages. I wish I could tell you about a company that's really tailoring towards SEN needs, but I actually haven't found one yet. If you have, then please drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear about it. But some of those lesson planning tools and stuff, if you are able to specify what some of those needs are, then it can help cater specifically towards what's needed. So, in particular, you can look at things like simplified language, slightly different, in some tools, slightly different fonts or slightly different kind of ways of viewing information. You can talk about, in terms of like the lesson planning, for example. My students have some sensory needs that are like this, and could you therefore come up with some activities that aren't too noisy and aren't too overwhelming, or aren't too physical, for example, and sort of start to train them in that way. But honestly, I think this is one of the things that we've been trying to work on and do ourselves here at Bowclips with some of the videos. Now, videos may not help every single person with special educational needs, but I in particular feel that, video is a fantastic way in for engagement with students with autism and students with ADHD as an engagement, and as a way of engaging with ideas that may not necessarily have to involve with talking to other people. I taught a lot of students where interactions physically with other people were quite difficult and quite it took a lot of energy to do that. And so being able to engage with the screen and being able to engage with videos just was a lot easier for quite a few things, especially when doing things like trying to learn a difficult topic. I actually have ADHD myself, and I love video for this reason, because you can go back and rewatch it if you sort of lost concentration halfway through. And so I can learn something at my speed, not at the speed that a teacher decided to deliver that to me. And oops, I wasn't listening for 5 minutes and I missed it. Video is great for this. Plus, it has all those extra added elements of being in real life examples of science experiments, or being able to offer you kind of slightly different explanations, maybe through song for your mathematical times tables, or whatever it might be. And I think this is why we feel that incorporating that in some of the AI tutor bot and lesson planning experiences that we've built, it allows you to really tailor that experience to some of those needs in a way that is really engaging. One of the things we've also done on our platform has been to look at things like Lexile leveling of videos. So we look at things like the complexity of language and how fast the language, the sort of person introducing it is speaking. That's not in our bot at the moment, but I think things like that and starting to introduce that kind of data into the AI will allow it to tailor itself better to, literacy needs, dyslexia, or other kind of variations of those types of requirements. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, we're a video company. I guess we try to get video use in education, so it's no surprise that we know a lot about that. And I do think that's partly important. When one thing we talked about quite a lot when ChatGPT first came out is just because ChatGPT exists doesn't mean people only want to learn via text now. There is so much value in other mediums, particularly things that people have created, whether that's resources like lesson plan resources, or just exercises that people have made, or video where creators have really thought about how to communicate a topic. There's so much value in that ChatGPT and other things just don't provide yet. And we want to make sure it exists. And that's why we've looked a lot into trying to incorporate video into a tutor style experience. An example I use quite a bit is one of the things I worked on during my PhD was detecting exoplanets. And if I try and explain how you detect an exoplanet to someone, you get the sort of ChatGPT answer of, a planet passes in front of the star dims. And based on how much it dims, you can see there's a planet there. And it's hard to really get that. But when you see a creator animate a planet moving in front of a star, animating the light so it goes like straight and then it goes down, and then they can animate there's a gap, and then they can translate that to the gap being due to the differences of how much light is blocked out by the planet, you start to get this really good explanation that a lot of people can understand. And things like ChatGPT just can't give you that. I think there's so much value in that sort of human created content that we don't really want to lose, and that's obviously valuable to a lot of people that learn differently. But I do think we will see a lot more tools to help people with this type of thing, because in theory, like, you can ask an AI already to help you adapt something to any kind of need. And it will do that to some extent. It will probably not do that quite well enough, and it'll miss things. It'll probably look good if you're not an expert in that area, but not be quite good enough. So there's a lot. Goes back to the final mile problem. The companies that are working on that, there's a lot of time spent trying to make it actually really good and useful, because what you really don't want to do is go, oh, look, the AI can now just adapt all this content for people with autism. And now the situation is worse than it was before. Because even though people didn't necessarily have time to do it as well as it could have been done, you can end up with the status quo that's worse if you're not careful.
No, and I totally agree, and I think we get asked a lot about AI to create video by clips, which is something we have tested, and I think done quite well in the few tests that we've run. We don't, we prefer to work with our creators for this. They're much more knowledgeable than we are about that. Few school, I know you're in the chat, so I'm sure you've done some of your own experiments, but what we found is, I don't think there's much risk at the moment of being able to just put in a chat prompt for a video and spit out a 10-minute explain a video on exoplanets with fantastic animation. It's just not likely to happen anytime soon. Maybe one day, but what it is fantastic for is helping with some of those video editing tools, some of those animating tools, and really allowing creators who maybe don't have entire studios and production teams and fancy cameras to actually start to tap into really engaging, visually fantastic content. The kind of stuff that 5 or 10 years ago we really could only imagine coming out of some of the biggest game studios on the planet is now something that is a little bit more in everybody's hands if they want to teach themselves how to use it. And, the way that can sort of democratize, who's making content, how they're making content, I think is going to be quite interesting. And yes, I think to that point, AI in education, I really hope we don't see a world in which people are just putting in simple prompts and getting terrible videos or terrible animations off the back of it and having a really boring experience. I really hope we see a world where they're putting in prompts but actually getting, much more incredible content, much more interactive content, much more sort of tailored content than we're able to offer at the moment. And really sort of opens, I guess they call it the metaverse. I'm not sure about that term, but opening up a whole new world of content that definitely I think is a possibility.
Yeah, the exciting thing there for me is not like, I'm not sure how excited I am about a world where I can ask for a video and it gives me an educational video that doesn't exist. Google did just recently release something that creates a podcast out of text. I don't know if people have tried this, but you basically, the idea is you can give it a complex topic or a textbook or something and that you want to learn about, and it creates a conversation between two people, kind of like this, where they actually talk about that topic and it tries to make you learn. It's a really interesting experiment because maybe that implies that actually you might like that. But what excites me more is the tooling. Like I do not know how to edit video and create good video and stuff. But the tools that have come out now mean that you can edit video via text. So like it'll make a transcript of the video, and then all of your ums and ahs, or if you didn't like a sentence, you basically delete the text and it edits the video to do that. There is ones that help you remove backgrounds, that help you remove people from subjects, helps you put stuff in, helps you pull in other animations, and that's more exciting because it enables people who had to be very experienced experts to do something that is good quality, still not as good as the experts are, but it enables you to do things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. And that opens up possibilities like a teacher might make a personalized video for their class because it took them 10 minutes to do. But previously, if it took them 3 hours to edit it and they had to learn how to do that, that was never going to happen. And that's where tooling is exciting to me. It enables things to happen that couldn't have happened without it.
No, totally. I think the example I had the other day was making a video 3 seconds longer. So if you have a video of a cat walking down the stairs, I think now you can just make it last 3 seconds longer and go down a couple more stairs. So I think that is where we're at rather than entire videos. But yeah, I think, you're exactly right with the teacher making their own video. And to be honest, I think I know a whole group of students that would love to get stuck in and start making their own videos as well. And I think, for example, can you use AI to quickly make a video that answers the question that we've set you rather than write an essay about it? Might be, an assessment in the future that fits a little bit better with the kind of world that's we're living in now and the kind of world that students are likely to work in.
So we are approaching, I guess, near the end. So I don't know if people have any further questions they want to ask. We could show highlights while people think of any questions, and we can end soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah. While any questions come in, I can show, because it was mentioned, someone asked how you see highlights. So this was a sort of an example of a tutor that we built. I wouldn't give it directly to students in a classroom because it doesn't have all the safety layering, but we wanted to sort of explore how you can include videos in a sort of experience like this. So the idea is that you can ask a question like, as I mentioned before, how do you detect exoplanets? And like ChatGPT, you'll get a partial text answer. But what we've tried to do is include short topic focused video clips to sort of enhance the answer. So rather than just getting text, you also get explanations. So, you get a bit of setup, but then you've got these videos that show you how these things work. So I can kind of play one. I don't know if it'll come across on the share. Hopefully it will.
Scientists are always keeping an eye out for extraterrestrial life, and finding friendly, intelligent life on another world, kind of a dream. But if we ever want a long-distance relationship with aliens, finding them is only half the battle. They also have to find us. And according to a paper published online last month in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, that might not be so easy. The researchers based their calculations on what someone on another planet would see if they tried to detect planets.
So you can try it out yourself if you want to see more from that video. But yeah, this is the idea. We want to surface these short topic focused videos that can really sort of enhance something and make it more engaging, and hopefully for people that learn differently as well, like you can actually show how you can actually use animations and stuff to see how things work. So yeah, you can try this out if you're interested.
We did get a couple of questions with that. So the exoplanet videos come from a partner of ours, Complexly, and a brand called SciShow. They also run the Crash Course channels, which you may have heard of. They're also on YouTube, and they've been a partner of ours for a while. Some fantastic videos there, and it is picked from there. But as Ryan said, what we've done is also be able to select the part of the video using AI that is most relevant to answering the question.
Yeah, and we provide that we've got an API at Bowclips where we provide these, where you can sort of query to get those videos if you wanted to put that in a product that you have. And we license all that content. So we're not pulling it, like stealing it from creators. They are signed up and they get royalties and stuff like that.
The other question is, what AI tools have you used to build highlights, Ryan?
So Highlight specifically mainly uses large language models, and it uses predominantly OpenAI's GPT-4o, and we customize it. So it uses prompts. So we have several different prompts that try and do different things. And the current versions are actually what you would describe as agents. So you get the query and you might ask it, what search queries should you use to look for videos for this query? And then the large language model then performs the search to try and find clips. The clips are returned, and then you can kind of say, okay, which are these good results? So that's one of the quality checking. And then you can go, okay, with the good results, make a reply that incorporates these videos into the text. So we've kind of custom made an AI agent that does these things using large language models like GPT-4o. And we use AI to both identify the clips and also to like surface it and give the responses. But one of the things that I think is pretty key about highlights is it kind of can't hallucinate. It can give you a video that you think isn't relevant, but it can't give you a video that is just wrong, because we have a limited catalog of trusted creators and trusted content that is accurate. So like you could ask for something and get a video about something that's slightly different, but you're not going to get a heart with 5 ventricles, which I've got from an image model, or a person with 6 fingers, or some text that is just actually wrong, because it's all anchored and the videos are all real. If the question about AI tools is broader, I sometimes use Perplexity to search. I use ChatGPT quite a lot for anything that's to do with formatting, like format this differently, or identifying things from a list, or comparing documents. I've used it for things like we've been sent a contract and then there's been changes to that contract, and I've asked it to compare the 2 PDFs to see if there's any changes that I haven't spotted myself. As a developer, I use the developer Copilot, which helps you like sort of auto-complete on your code. I use that every day. So I think there's lots and lots, and in the video side of things, I think we've also used lots as well.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. And we don't at the moment create custom videos at Bowclips. I don't think I know anyone that does that with AI particularly at the moment.
Yeah, the reason being, so there is a tool, I can't remember it, we could include it at the end, that creates video from a prompt it turns the prompt into a script, and then it searches stock video and stock image footage to create a video, which is basically like a slide deck moving through different stock videos and images as it talks over. So obviously uses AI to do text to speech, AI for the script, and then it's using actual stock footage to pull in the images and the videos. There are video models that you can just go text to model, but they aren't great in that if I like try and use them, you might prompt it 5 times and like the first 5 are not very good. And even if you look at some of the demos of the companies that build these, like you'll see things warping and changing. You will see people like weird things happening. They're definitely not like education ready. They're more like, marketing, like sort of cheap social marketing ready rather than education ready. And they're not really much better than stock unless you want to do something weird like a llama in space or stuff like that. I think the real power for creating videos is allowing you to like change things in stock and change other things.
And one of the things that we have done as well that I think has tapped into, especially increased accessibility, has been to use AI to, translate content, to improve captions. We're looking at ways that we can use AI to start providing audio descriptions on the content, and all of that, which, previously something like audio descriptions was really quite complicated, quite expensive, very manual. Is now suddenly, a possibility for us to maybe be able to provide that alongside a video, because, we can actually do it in a sort of at scale in a more affordable way. And I think that is something that, therefore will allow our videos to be a little bit more customized. So there's a couple more comments.
Yeah, there's one about what our opinions are. I guess it depends what you mean. So like I think that the classroom does need to start thinking about how to use AI. Like the problem is a lot of these things aren't easy, right? Like you can't say that it's the wrong thing for to ignore AI in education, because people are going to grow up with these tools and they're only going to get better. But should you should students not learn to write any sort of content because ChatGPT can do it for them? Should they learn that ChatGPT is the only way to do research and they shouldn't look at other forms and learn how to do referencing? I don't think so yet. Like, I don't think we're in a place where we think that people shouldn't learn how to do these things. I am very excited about how personalization can improve. I think the hardest thing with it is checking, because if I create a quick personalization feature now, it's exactly what we said with like, how could you adapt content for autism? I think it's really easy to give a worse experience to everyone because you can't monitor what's going on. You can't see what the AI is doing. And I think you can create an inferior experience for everyone if you just go and do that blindly. So that means that there's a lot of checking that you have to do, that this is definitely better. And one of the ways that these things generally work is it's probably going to be slow in the sort of more developed parts of the world. But what's really exciting, and this is something, again, that Khan Academy have also spoken out on, is not everyone in the world has a teacher. No, definitely not everyone in the world has a tutor. And a lot of these tools offer something that doesn't exist before. And I think you will see adoption in different parts of the world be much higher because it's replacing nothing or very little. And that'll really help progress the technology so that it can be used elsewhere. So I'm very excited. I think usage is lower than most people would believe based on what they see on social media. They almost think everyone's using AI, and you sometimes hear things thrown about. But it is going to take more time than people expect.
Absolutely. I'm very conscious of the time. I want to thank everyone who's joined us for their time as well. I hope you found it useful. We absolutely will be sending out a recap with some of those links and tools that we talked about on there, as well as a bit more information about the highlights that Ryan showed you. And if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with us and talk a little bit more about AI, then we really welcome that. Really happy to do that.
Yeah, and we'll also include, there was a question about if there's any video to be able to see. We did create some AI assisted videos. So it was someone that was building it using AI tools rather than an AI generating the video. We can also include a few links to some of those videos as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye.